To start out, we'll start with the news of the day. President Trump walked away from a deal with Kim Jong-un. How do you feel about that?
I think it was a great move. I mean, what was being offered, the demand, if you will, was for the United States to remove 100% of the sanctions against North Korea. To do so would have removed every bit of the leverage that we have to try to denuclearize the region. And so I think the president absolutely made the right move in saying we're not going there. And I think ultimately that will be a move that we'll all look back upon and say that right there is what started the real talks and the real progress towards peace in North Korea. So I think it's a good move, the right move, and I certainly don't think that it's over. I believe the sanctions work, and the reason Kim brought it up is because his country is feeling the impacts of those sanctions. So I think absolutely he'll be back to the table.
Are you frustrated at all with the progress that's being made?
I think the progress is being remarkable, has been remarkable. I mean, we have a regime that's been there for 80 years. We've had one presidential administration after another that has accomplished absolutely nothing. It is remarkable to me that in 2 short years, we're now having the second summit with North Korea. That in itself is an amazing demonstration of leadership and steps in the right direction. True, it can be argued that these talks fell apart, but I don't take it that way. I think this summit gives evidence that leadership was at the table, and I believe it's going to lead to the next series of talks, and eventually we're going to see a denuclearized North Korea.
Here at home, we are facing $22 trillion in debt. I understand you call yourself a fiscal conservative. Is that true?
Oh, yeah.
What are we going to do about this debt?
I think that's no question one of the top 2 or 3 issues we're facing in this country. We simply cannot continue going down a path of financial irresponsibility. We are marching towards economic disaster if we don't get our financial house in order. And unfortunately, with the Republicans being in control the last couple of years, they were just as guilty with the irresponsible spending as the Democrats have been. And at some point, people have to understand that this is a massive national security issue as well as a global economic issue. And it's amazing to me that we did so little when we had the majority as Republicans. Now all of a sudden so many Republicans are screaming, we got to get our financial house in order, but they weren't willing to make that same commitment while we had the opportunity to do so. And as a result, now we're looking at the Democrats with the Green New Deal alone, a $93 trillion estimated. I mean, it's just insane what we're even talking about these days, but we have got to get our financial house in order.
And how do we do that? Where do we need to cut or increase?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple ways, but bottom line, you can't spend more than you take in. We were so close to getting a balanced budget amendment passed years ago. I think we've got to be able to come back to do that. I don't think there's any chance of doing that in Congress. So frankly, I support the move that the states are doing to try to force that issue. And I believe, that's the beauty of being in the United States. It's not to be led entirely by the federal government, but the states have significant power and authority. So, as far as that particular issue goes, I see traction potentially coming through the states on that. But one of the biggest issues we have, obviously there's a lot of wasteful spending that needs to be dealt with, but the biggest frustration personally for me that I was not aware of prior to getting to Congress is about 70% of our budget is on mandatory spending, issues that we can't even get to as members of Congress. They're on autopilot, and those are the things that are breaking us, and yet we really can't get to them. What we have authorization to deal with is discretionary funding, which includes the military. So how do you cut a whole lot out of what we really need to defend ourselves? But the discretionary is only about 30% of the budget, and we're supposed to balance everything when all we have jurisdiction over is this small amount. So that makes it an extremely difficult process to rein it in, but therein lies the biggest part of the problem.
Can you expand? You said it was a national security issue. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, if we're not able to keep our finances, if we go in debt, if we default on our loan, I mean, everything falls apart. We can't supply our military, we can't defend our borders, we can't do anything if we are not fiscally responsible. And one of the things that we're seeing from Russia and China right now, both of them have strong economies, and as a result, relatively speaking, certainly they live in a different political environment as well, to where they have the right to more or less dictate where their money is going to be spent. But they are able right now to really be making significant advances in their military weaponry and defense. And so we've got to be able to not only keep up, we've got to be able to stay in the driver's seat in order to defend our country and to keep peace in the world. And if we lose on the economic front, then we lose across the board. So it's becoming more and more of popular understanding that the economy is not just the economy, it's also a national security issue.
We have seen the Democratic Party shift very radically to the left. You mentioned the Green New Deal. That's just one of the things that has really changed in the past few years. Do you think that moderate Democrats are going to start coming into the GOP, or becoming a partyless bloc that is going to vote Republican?
That's an interesting question, and time will tell us whether some of the more moderate Democrats want to come be a part of the GOP. We'll see. But your observation is frighteningly accurate. What's happening in the Democrat Party right now? I mean, we have a group of freshmen in the Democrat Party that are outright outspoken socialists, and they are loud, they are vocal, they are demanding, and what was already an extremely far left Democrat Party is being taken even further and further to the left than what any of us ever would have imagined, to where now, I mean, the party is embracing socialism. And, I don't see any positive end in that type of platform that's developing in the Democrat Party. So I'm hopeful. Democrats in districts like mine, for example, there's no question some of them will fully embrace the direction that the current Democrat Party is going. But there's also no question in the 10th District of Georgia, many of the Democrats there are frightened themselves with the direction of the current Democrat Party. So it'll be interesting to see the decisions they make in the future.
And what can the GOP do in terms of messaging to counteract? I mean, they're promising free almost everything. What are the messages the Republicans can put out to counteract that narrative?
Yeah, and it's really hard to run against free. It's kind of hard to, that's not an easy task in itself when somebody's standing in front of you talking about, I'm going to give you free health care and free education and free money and free jobs and free this and that and the other. It's very difficult to run against that. But the reality is, and you know it, I know it, nothing is free. If there is something of value that is being given, someone is providing that valuable item, whatever it may be. And in this case, it's obviously the taxpayers that is shouldering all these free programs, as the Democrats are calling it. So I think we have got to, there are so many areas that we've got to focus on, from retaking the education program to teaching free enterprise principles, all these types of things, from the educational side of things to our civic leaders, to our political leaders, to our media, individuals across the board. I feel like we're at a point that we almost have to re-educate our country as to who we are, what we've been established upon, and it works. There is no nation in the history of the world that has lifted more people out of poverty than the American free enterprise system. And yet we are now watching an outright attack on that economic engine and that opportunity that's been granted to people regardless of their economic background, their race or color, their religion. Anyone and everyone has the right in this country to move forward economically, and socialism does just the opposite. So we've got an enormous task before us to really re-educate what the American free enterprise system is all about.
My last question is about some of the comments we have been hearing about abortion. Well, the debate in the Senate right now, whether a baby should be revived. I mean, I understand you're a pro-life advocate, but what do you say to people, though, who really firmly believe that this is the right thing?
It's never the right thing to murder someone. You would agree with that. I would agree with that. Even pro-choice people would agree with that. And where the pro-choice movement, the far left, has taken the abortion argument, and you're right, I'm as pro-life as you can get. I believe in protecting life from conception to natural death. But the argument now has gone far beyond that. We're no longer talking about abortion, which deals with life in the womb. We're now talking about a life out of the womb, a physical baby that you can hold and hug, and you can listen to cry and to wiggle, and you can see this baby. And saying now, do we want to keep this baby alive or do we want to kill it? That is no longer a question of abortion. That is a question of murdering an innocent life. And I have found that many people, even who are pro-choice, are strongly opposed to this new movement of infanticide, of killing innocent babies. And so that is really where the movement is taking us at this point. I think as recent as 5 years ago, no one would have imagined that we would be having this argument at this point. But that's why at this time, the issues of life and the defense of life are more critical now than they've ever been. Without the right to life, really, as Reagan used to say, none of our other rights matter if we don't even have a right to life itself.
Very true. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Holly, thank you
really
for having me.
appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.